"Easy, this hurts," she said quietly. The rancher stopped, then reassured her gently. The morning started like many others on the ranch, quiet and slow, with the sky still soft in color. The sun had not fully risen yet, but its light was already spreading gently over the wide land. The air was cool, carrying the smell of dry grass, soil, and animals. Birds moved from fence to fence, and somewhere in the distance, cattle made low sounds as they waited for the day to begin. The rancher had been awake for hours. He always woke before sunrise. Years of ranch life had shaped his habits, and his body no longer needed an alarm. He moved steadily, not rushing but not wasting time either. Every step he took had purpose. His boots were worn, his hands rough from years of work, but his movements were calm and controlled. He believed that the land responded better to patience than force. That morning, he knew someone new was coming to help for a while. It was not unusual for people to come and go from the ranch. Some stayed for days, others for weeks. Life had taught him not to expect too much too quickly. Still, he prepared the tools, checked the fences, and planned the work carefully. He wanted the day to go smoothly, especially with someone unfamiliar with ranch life. When she arrived, the sun was just beginning to rise higher. Her car stopped near the old wooden gate and she stepped out slowly. She looked around, taking in the open land, the animals, and the silence. It was different from the place she came from. There were no loud sounds, no crowds, only space and quiet. She stood there for a moment, adjusting her jacket, as if gathering courage. The rancher noticed her posture right away. She held herself carefully, almost stiff, like someone who did not want to draw attention. Her face showed tiredness, though she tried to hide it with a polite smile when he approached. He greeted her simply. There was no long talk, no unnecessary words. He believed actions spoke louder. He showed her where to place her bag and explained the basic plan for the day. His voice was steady and calm, not loud, not commanding. It made the space feel safe. As they began working, the ranch slowly came to life. Animals were fed, gates were opened, and tools were moved from place to place. The work was not easy, but it followed a rhythm. For the rancher, this rhythm was familiar, almost comforting. For her, it was new. At first, she tried to match his pace. She did not complain. She listened carefully, nodded when he explained things, and followed instructions as best she could. She wanted to prove she could handle it. There was something inside her pushing her to keep going, even when her body felt heavy. The rancher noticed small things. He always did. He saw how she paused for just a second longer than necessary, how she adjusted her grip often, how her breathing became uneven when tasks required more effort. These were signs he had learned to read over the years, not just in animals but in people too. Still, he said nothing. He believed in giving people space. Some needed time to find their balance. He did not want to embarrass her or make her feel weak. Instead, he slowed his own movements slightly, making the work feel less rushed. As the morning went on, the sun climbed higher and the air grew warmer. Dust rose with every step. The work continued steadily. She remained quiet, focused, and determined. But beneath that determination was strain. It showed in her eyes, which sometimes drifted away as if she were lost in thought. She had not come to the ranch by accident. Life had led her there after a long period of difficulty. She was trying to rebuild something inside herself, though she did not fully understand what yet. The ranch represented a chance to breathe, to escape noise, to feel useful again. The rancher sensed that she carried more than just physical tiredness. He had seen that look before in people who came seeking quiet rather than work alone, people who needed space to heal, even if they did not say it out loud. They worked side by side without much conversation. The silence was not uncomfortable. It felt natural, like the land itself was speaking. Occasionally, he would explain something and she would listen carefully. Her respect for the work was clear. She was trying, truly trying. As time passed, the tasks grew more demanding. Lifting, guiding, holding steady. She managed, but the effort was visible. Her movements became careful, measured. She was no longer matching his pace. Instead, she focused on finishing one small task at a time. The rancher noticed how she avoided eye contact during these moments. It was as if she did not want him to see her struggle. He understood that feeling well. Pride often kept people silent when they needed help the most. The land around them remained calm. Cattle moved slowly. The wind passed gently through dry grass. Everything else seemed balanced while she fought a quiet battle inside herself. At one point she paused, resting her hands on her knees for just a moment before straightening up again. She thought he had not seen it, but he had. He always saw. He chose not to react immediately. Instead, he changed the task slightly, making it less demanding without drawing attention to the reason. He believed kindness worked best when it did not make the other person feel small. She noticed the change but said nothing. A quiet relief passed over her face, though she quickly hid it. She continued working, grateful for the small ease, even if she did not fully understand why it happened. As midday approached, the heat increased. Sweat formed on her forehead. Her hands trembled slightly when she thought no one was watching. The effort of keeping herself composed was becoming harder than the work itself. The rancher felt a familiar sense of responsibility, not just for the land or animals, but for the people who shared the space. He believed that real strength was shown through care, not control. Still, he waited. He wanted her to speak if she needed to. He believed that choice mattered. Forcing concern on someone could sometimes do more harm than good. The moment was building quietly. The kind of moment that changes the tone of a day, even if it seems small. The ranch continued its rhythm, unaware that something important was about to happen. She took a breath, deeper than before. Her shoulders tightened and her expression changed. It was subtle but real. She was reaching a limit, though she had not yet admitted it even to herself. The rancher slowed his steps and turned slightly toward her, not directly, but enough to show awareness. He was ready, waiting, present. The day had begun like any other, but it was no longer just about work. It was about understanding, patience, and the quiet space between words where real stories begin. The work continued as the sun moved higher in the sky. The quiet of the early morning slowly faded, replaced by warm air and steady sounds from the land. Tools touched wood and metal, footsteps pressed into dry soil, and animals shifted calmly around them. Everything followed its usual rhythm, but inside her, something felt out of balance. She tried to focus on each task the rancher gave her. She listened carefully, repeating instructions in her mind so she would not make mistakes. She wanted to do well. More than that, she wanted to feel useful. Each small success gave her a short moment of relief, but it never lasted long. Her body felt heavy, and every movement required more effort than she expected. The rancher walked a few steps ahead, carrying himself with ease. His pace was steady, never rushed. He did not look back often, but when he did, his eyes noticed everything. He saw the way she adjusted her hands again and again. He saw how she shifted her weight carefully, as if protecting herself from something unseen. These details did not escape him. She told herself it was just tiredness. Anyone new to ranch work would feel it, she thought. She reminded herself to stay quiet, to keep going. In her past, speaking up had often felt risky. It had been easier to stay silent than to explain pain that others might not understand. As they moved to another task, one that required more strength and balance, her chest tightened slightly. She took a slow breath and followed him, telling herself she could manage. At first she did. She held steady, copying his movements as best she could. But after a few moments, a sharp discomfort spread through her arm and down her side. It was not sudden, but it was strong enough to make her pause. Her hands loosened slightly and her breathing changed. She tried to hide it, tried to push past it, but her body refused. The rancher noticed the pause right away. He stopped his movement, though he did not turn fully toward her yet. He waited, giving her space, allowing her to decide what to do next. She stood there, frozen between wanting to continue and knowing she could not. The silence around them felt louder than before. The animals nearby were calm, unaware of her struggle. The wind moved gently as if nothing was wrong. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was low, almost unsure. "Easy, this hurts," she said quietly. The words felt heavy as soon as they left her mouth. She was not sure how he would react. Part of her expected impatience or disappointment. Another part of her feared being told she was not strong enough for the work. The rancher stopped completely. He did not sigh. He did not show frustration. He turned toward her slowly, his movements careful and calm. His face showed concern but not alarm. "All right," he said gently. "Let's stop for a moment." Those simple words changed the air between them. There was no pressure in his voice, no judgment, just acceptance. She let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, though her body still ached. She avoided his eyes at first, embarrassed that she had spoken up at all. He stepped closer, not invading her space but near enough to show support. "You don't need to push through pain," he said quietly. "This work can wait." She nodded, unsure what to say. No one had said that to her in a long time. In her experience, pain was something to ignore, something to hide. Hearing someone acknowledge it without questioning felt unfamiliar. They stood there for a moment. The rancher looked at the task they had been doing and then adjusted it without making a big deal. He changed the angle, reduced the effort needed, and showed her a safer way to continue if she felt able. "Tell me if it still feels wrong," he added. "We can change it again." She looked at him then, surprised. His eyes were steady and kind. He was serious. He meant what he said. She tried the adjusted task carefully. It was still work, but the sharp discomfort eased slightly. She moved slower now, and he matched her pace without comment. As they worked, her thoughts wandered. She wondered why this moment felt so important. It was just a small pause, just a few words. Yet it felt like something inside her had shifted. The rancher continued working beside her, not watching too closely, but not ignoring her either. He found a balance that made her feel respected rather than watched. After a few minutes, he suggested they take a short break. They walked to a shaded area near a fence and sat down. He handed her some water without asking questions. She drank slowly, feeling the coolness help steady her breathing. The discomfort had not disappeared, but it was no longer overwhelming. "I should have said something sooner," she said softly, more to herself than to him. He shook his head. "You said it when you were ready," he replied. "That's enough." She studied the ground, tracing lines in the dust with her boot. She wanted to explain, to say why it was hard for her to speak up, but the words felt tangled. He did not push her. Silence settled between them again, but this time it felt lighter. Not empty, just calm. After a while, he stood and offered to adjust the rest of the day's work. He suggested tasks that required less strain, things that still mattered but would not push her body too far. She agreed, grateful but still unsure how to express it. As they returned to work, she noticed something new. The land seemed less overwhelming. The wide space no longer felt like pressure. Instead, it felt open, forgiving. She moved with more awareness now, listening to her body instead of fighting it. Each step felt more grounded. She realized that being careful did not mean being weak. The rancher continued to work nearby, occasionally offering guidance, always calm. He never brought up the moment again, never made it a lesson. But the lesson was there, quietly settling in her mind. As the afternoon approached, the sun softened slightly and the shadows grew longer. The work went on, slower but steadier. She felt tired but not defeated. That one quiet sentence she had spoken had changed the direction of the day. It had turned routine labor into something more meaningful. It had shown her that being heard did not always require loud words. And for the rancher, it was another reminder of something he already believed deeply. That real strength was not about endurance alone, but about knowing when to stop, when to listen, and when to care. The ranch returned to its steady rhythm, but for both of them, something important had already taken place, something that would stay with them long after the work was done. After the short break, the ranch felt quieter, even though the sounds around them stayed the same. The animals moved slowly, the wind brushed against the tall grass, and the wooden fences stood still under the warm light. Yet something between them had changed. The work was no longer just work. It had become slower, softer, and more thoughtful. The rancher walked a little closer to her now, not because he doubted her, but because he wanted her to feel supported. His presence was steady, like the land itself. He did not speak much, but when he did, his words were careful and calm. He explained each task clearly, leaving room for her to move at her own pace. She noticed this right away. He no longer assumed she could do things the same way he did. Instead, he adjusted. He showed her small tricks he had learned over the years, ways to reduce effort and protect the body. These were things he usually kept to himself, learned through long days and quiet mistakes. "Work smarter, not harder," he said once, almost casually. Those words stayed with her. She tried the next task slowly, following his guidance. Her movements were careful but more confident than before. The sharp discomfort was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She felt like she had permission to listen to herself. The rancher watched without staring. When she did something right, he nodded slightly. When she struggled, he stepped in gently, not to take over but to guide. He never raised his voice. He never rushed her. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel like she had to prove anything. As the afternoon stretched on, the sun softened, casting long shadows across the ground. The heat eased, and a gentle breeze passed through the open fields. The land seemed to slow down with them, as if it understood the need for rest and patience. They worked near a line of fences that needed checking. It was quieter there, away from most of the animals. The silence gave space for thoughts to rise. She found herself thinking about how different this felt from her past experiences. In other places, pain had been ignored. Slowing down had been seen as failure. Here, it felt like part of the process. At one point, the rancher paused and leaned against a post, stretching his shoulders. He looked out over the land for a long moment, as if measuring time not in hours but in seasons. "You know," he said, breaking the silence, "this land teaches you if you listen." She glanced at him, curious. "Teaches what?" she asked. "Patience," he replied, "and respect for yourself, too." His words were simple, but they carried weight. He spoke from experience, not from theory. She could hear it in his voice. She nodded slowly. "I'm not very good at that," she admitted. "Listening to myself." He smiled just a little. "Most people aren't," he said. "They learn the hard way, or they don't learn at all." They returned to work, but the conversation stayed with her. Each movement now felt connected to that idea of respect. She stopped when something felt wrong. She adjusted when needed. And each time she did, nothing bad happened. The rancher did not correct her. He did not show disappointment. Instead, he accepted it as natural. Later, as they carried tools back toward the shed, she moved more slowly than before. The rancher noticed and took some of the weight without comment. He did it so smoothly that it felt like teamwork, not help. She felt a small warmth in her chest, not from the sun but from the realization that she was not alone in this space. They placed the tools carefully, one by one. The day's work was not fully finished, but enough had been done. The rancher believed in knowing when to stop. Pushing beyond that point often caused more harm than good. He sat down on a low bench near the shed, wiping his hands on a cloth. She hesitated, then sat nearby, leaving a comfortable distance between them. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she said quietly, "Thank you." For earlier, he looked at her surprised. "For what?" "For stopping," she said, "for not making it a problem." He considered her words. "It wasn't a problem," he said simply. "It was just a moment." She swallowed. To her, it had been more than that. It had been a rare moment of being seen without being judged. I'm used to pushing through, she said after a pause. Even when I shouldn't, he nodded slowly. That can work for a while, he said, but it always costs something. She looked down at her hands. They were dusty, tired, but steady. I think I'm starting to understand that, she said. The rancher leaned back slightly, resting against the wall. This place, he said, gesturing around them, it doesn't respond well to force. Neither do people. His words felt honest, not rehearsed. He had learned them through years of watching seasons change, through mistakes and quiet lessons the land had offered him. As the light began to fade, the ranch felt softer. The day's tension had lifted. Even the animals seemed more relaxed, settling into their evening routine. She stood up slowly, testing her balance. Her body was tired, but it felt different now. Less strained, more understood. I can keep going if you need, she said, partly out of habit. He shook his head. You've done enough for today, he replied. Tomorrow's another day. Those words brought unexpected relief. Tomorrow. The idea felt hopeful instead of heavy. They walked toward the house together, the path familiar to him, new to her. The sky above them shifted into warmer colors, soft oranges and pale blues blending quietly. She realized she was looking forward to coming back the next day. Not because the work would be easy, but because she felt safe enough to be honest. As they reached the porch, the rancher paused. If something feels wrong again, he said, say it, no matter how small. She met his eyes and nodded. I will, she said, and for the first time she believed it. The day ended without big events, without dramatic moments. But something important had taken root. Trust had begun to grow, slowly and naturally, like the land itself. As the evening settled over the ranch, both of them carried a quiet understanding with them. That gentle reassurance, given without demand or expectation, had changed the shape of the day. And sometimes that is how real change begins, not with loud words or strong actions, but with a calm voice, a patient pause, and the simple choice to care. The next morning arrived gently, just like the day before. Soft light spread across the ranch, touching the land without hurry. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the quiet promise of a new start. Birds moved across the sky and the animals stirred slowly, following their familiar routines. She arrived earlier this time. There was a calmness in her steps that had not been there before. Her body still felt tired, but her mind felt clearer. She stood for a moment near the gate, breathing in the open space, letting the quiet settle inside her. The ranch no longer felt strange. It felt welcoming. The rancher noticed her arrival from a distance. He nodded once in greeting, the same simple way he always did. There was no need for many words. The understanding between them from the previous day was still there, unspoken but strong. They began the day with lighter tasks. He explained them carefully, making sure she felt comfortable before starting. She listened, not with fear of making mistakes, but with curiosity. She asked questions when something was unclear, surprising herself with how easy it felt to speak up now. As they worked, the rhythm returned, but it was different from before. It was slower, more thoughtful. She paid attention to her movements, adjusting when needed. The rancher noticed and respected that. He did not correct her unless it truly mattered. At one point, they worked near a small, open area where the grass was shorter and the ground was uneven. She moved carefully, watching her steps. A few weeks ago, she would have rushed, afraid of falling behind. Now she allowed herself time. You're doing fine, the rancher said quietly, noticing her hesitation. She smiled slightly. I'm just being careful. That's not a bad thing, he replied. Those words stayed with her as they continued. As the sun rose higher, they took a short pause. They sat on a low fence facing the open land. The view stretched far, showing fields, animals, and distant trees. The silence felt comfortable, like a shared understanding. She broke it softly. I didn't expect this place to feel like this. He glanced at her. Like what? Safe, she said after a moment. I thought it would be hard. I thought I'd have to prove myself. He considered her words. "You don't have to prove much here," he said. "The land tells you what it needs, you just listen." She nodded, thinking about how often she had ignored her own needs in the past. Listening felt new but right. As the day continued, she found herself opening up little by little. Not all at once, not with heavy details, but with simple truths. She spoke about how she had learned to stay quiet, how speaking up had once led to trouble instead of help. The rancher listened without interrupting. He did not react strongly. He simply listened, which somehow felt more powerful than any advice. "When you work alone for a long time," he said eventually, "you learn that silence can be peaceful, but when you work with others, silence shouldn't hurt." Her chest tightened slightly at those words. They felt honest and kind. They moved to another task that afternoon, one that required cooperation. The rancher showed her how to handle it safely, then let her try. She was slower but steady. When she struggled, she spoke up right away. "Can we do this a different way?" she asked. He nodded without hesitation. "Of course." They adjusted together. The task became easier and the tension she once felt did not return. Each time she spoke up, nothing bad happened. Each time the world did not fall apart. Instead, things improved. This realization slowly changed something deep inside her. Later in the day, they worked near the animals. She watched how the rancher moved around them, calm and patient. He never rushed them, never raised his voice. He waited, observed, and responded gently. "They trust you," she said quietly. He smiled faintly. "Trust takes time," he said. "And consistency." She thought about that. Trust, time, consistency. These were not things she had often experienced together before. As the afternoon faded, clouds drifted slowly across the sky, offering shade. The heat eased, and a light breeze moved through the fields. The ranch felt alive but peaceful. They finished earlier than planned. The rancher believed in ending the day on a good note rather than pushing too far. He gathered the tools and she helped, feeling a quiet sense of accomplishment. As they walked back, she realized something important. The pain she had felt before was still there, but it no longer frightened her. It was something she could manage, something she could talk about. It no longer controlled her actions. Before parting for the day, she paused. "I used to think being strong meant never stopping," she said. He looked at her kindly. "Strength changes with time," he replied. "Sometimes it means knowing when to stop." She smiled, feeling those words settle deep inside her. That evening, as she left the ranch, the sky was painted with soft colors. She felt tired but calm. The weight she had carried for so long felt lighter, even if it was not gone. The rancher watched her go, then returned to his quiet routines. He did not think of himself as doing anything special. He had simply acted the way the land had taught him to act, with patience, with care. But for her, those small moments had meant everything. The following days continued much the same way. Work, pauses, quiet conversations. Each day she grew more confident in her voice. Each day she trusted herself a little more. The ranch became a place of steady healing, not because it removed pain, but because it allowed honesty. It allowed rest. It allowed space to grow without pressure. And in that simple, open land, surrounded by steady routines and gentle understanding, she began to feel something she had not felt in a long time: hope. The final days on the ranch arrived quietly, without any clear sign that they were the last. Life there continued the same way it always had: steady mornings, thoughtful work, calm evenings. Yet inside her, something had clearly changed. She felt it in the way she woke up, in the way she breathed, and in the way she walked across the open land with more confidence than before. Each morning, she greeted the day without the tight feeling in her chest that had once followed her everywhere. The work was still demanding and her body still carried limits, but she no longer saw those limits as weaknesses. They were signals now, guides she trusted. The rancher noticed the change too. He saw how she moved with more ease, how she spoke without hesitation when something felt wrong, and how she took pride in her work without pushing herself too far. He never mentioned it directly. He believed real growth did not need praise to be real. On one of the last mornings, the sky was covered with soft clouds, and the air felt cooler than usual. They worked near the far side of the land, a place she had not spent much time before. The space felt wide and open, stretching far beyond what the eye could see. She paused for a moment, looking around. "I think I'll miss this," she said quietly. The rancher nodded. "Places like this have a way of staying with you," he replied. They continued working, moving carefully, comfortably. The silence between them felt familiar now, like an old habit. It was not empty. It was full of understanding. As the day went on, they talked more than usual. Not about heavy things, not about the past in detail, but about simple moments. About how the land changed with seasons. About mistakes that turned into lessons. About how time slowly reshapes people, whether they notice it or not. She listened closely, realizing that the rancher was not just teaching her about work. He was showing her a way of living, one built on patience, awareness, and respect. Later, while resting near the fence, she spoke again, her voice steady. "I used to think I had to be tough all the time," she said. "I thought stopping meant failing." He looked at her thoughtfully. "The land breaks if you force it," he said. "People do too." She smiled at that. The truth of it felt clear now. As the sun moved lower in the sky, they finished the last task of the day. It was simple work, but it felt meaningful. The rancher placed the tools away carefully, the same way he always did. Routine mattered to him. It gave structure to the quiet. She helped, then stood there for a moment, unsure what to say next. Endings had always been difficult for her. They made her uncomfortable. The rancher broke the silence. "You've done good work here," he said. "Not because you pushed yourself, but because you paid attention." Those words meant more to her than any praise she had received before. They recognized effort without celebrating pain. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." He nodded, accepting her words simply. "Take what you've learned with you," he replied. "That's what matters." As evening settled, the ranch grew quieter. The animals moved toward rest, and the light softened into gentle colors. She took one last look across the land, feeling a deep sense of calm. She realized something important then. The ranch had not fixed her. It had not removed her pain or solved all her problems. What it had done was remind her that she had a voice, that her limits deserved respect, that kindness could exist without conditions. The next morning, she prepared to leave. Her bag was light, but her heart felt full. The rancher stood nearby, offering a simple goodbye. There were no long speeches, no promises, just a shared understanding. As she walked toward her car, she felt stronger than she had in years. Not because she had endured hardship, but because she had learned to stop when something hurt and speak when something mattered. She drove away slowly, watching the ranch fade into the distance. But the lesson stayed close. It stayed in her posture, in her breathing, in her choices. Back in her daily life, she carried that quiet strength with her. When work became overwhelming, she paused. When something felt wrong, she spoke. Each time she remembered the rancher stopping, listening, and reassuring her gently. And in those moments she understood something deeply true. Real strength does not shout. Real care does not rush. And sometimes the smallest pause can change the direction of a life. The ranch returned to its routines, just as it always had. The rancher continued his work, steady and patient. He never thought of himself as changing anyone's life. He simply treated people the way the land had taught him to treat everything, with respect and care. But somewhere beyond the wide fields and quiet mornings, a woman lived differently now. Because once, when she said softly, "Easy, this hurts," someone stopped. And that made all the difference.